Hello and welcome to the comparison you've all been waiting for, Virtual Energy Blackout versus Dark Code versus Infinite PhysiX. They all share the same REX Pearl cover and have strong asymmetric cores, and there are a few different reasons for a comparison. Either you like the Dark or Infinite or both and are hoping the Blackout is a serviceable replacement, or you didn't like one or both and are hoping the Blackout is a different story, so we're going to take a look and see. Before we get started, big shout out and thanks as always to Royal Crest Lanes. They're a big part of bringing these videos to you. All it takes is a text and we have everything we need. Also, my code ROSEDAL10 will get you 10% off your order at checkout at CoolWick, and if you check the description, you'll find a bunch of helpful links and information, including our personal specs, and a link to buy the Blackout at Boulder's Mart. I do receive a 5% commission on all sales through the link. To get started, we're on the Kegel Chromium lane condition. It's a challenge pattern that's 42 feet long, 25.5 mils, and just under a 7-to-1 ratio. It's not as punishing as a sport pattern, but not as easy or forgiving as a house pattern. All three balls have the same layout, and the surfaces have been reset to 1000 with Jayhawk Bowling Supply's Diamond Dust pads on a resurfacing machine, then finished with a light application of Storm's Step 2 compound. The Dark Code was the first ball to feature REX Pearl in mid-2021, and it has the strongest core of the three balls, but only marginally. REX Pearl is a blend of Storm's second strongest cover in NEX and their flagship cover R2S, which by now, almost 2 decades after it debuted, is in the bottom third of their cover strengths. NEX is very strong, but surprisingly clean and sharp for how much traction it gets, while R2S shaped somewhat similarly, it's just nowhere near the same level of traction. Basically, we're talking about the difference between the Proton Physics, which featured NEX, and the Astrophysics, which featured R2S. NEX Pearl was a little weird on the Axiom Pearl though, and if you've noticed, we've seen NEX Solid quite a bit, NEX Pearl once, and haven't seen NEX Hybrid at all. There seems to be something odd the Pearl additives due to the cover formula. The Axiom Pearl was like a stronger Marvel Pearl, but it felt a surprising amount weaker than the Axiom, and was both clean and blendy to the point that it almost felt lazy. The idea behind adding R2S to NEX was to achieve the shape and control R2S is known for, but with more overall strength. The result in the Dark Code was a ball that acted like a really strong Code Black, kind of. While I liked both of mine, general opinions were somewhat mixed. Some people still thought it was lazy, it didn't hook as much as they expected, didn't seem to hook in the right place, etc. I think this was more a continuing misunderstanding of what hook actually is and how strong this ball actually is. Used in the proper situations and on the proper oil volumes, I've seen this ball be an absolute monster. The one we're watching is my second one, and I have another one yet in the stash. The core in the Dark is the uber popular Rad 4. There have been dozens and dozens of code releases worldwide, and it continues to be a very popular name. 250 RG, 058 differential, and an 020 intermediate differential. So the highest RG of the three, but a monster differential. You won't find a bigger one than that anymore after Jackal Gate a few years ago. Then anything at 020 or over on the int diff is pretty big, so strong rolly core that almost acts more like an ultra strong symmetric core rather than an asim one. It doesn't have quite the same amount of back-end torque that others do, or it might be that it's just early enough that it tends to blend down lane a bit more. Moving to the Infinite, this one was much better received, however it wasn't without its own criticisms. It was very short-lived, making it less than a year, but I don't think that was necessarily due to the popularity. All the 4000 or 4K fast finished balls got axed at the same time for whatever reason. The Infinite acts somewhat different from the Dark. It seems to be much more consistent for most people, more like what you would expect from a traditional solid type idea. It actually reminds me quite a bit of the Special Agent to go all the way back. I have the Dark code rolling earlier, but the Infinite actually getting traction earlier for whatever reason. Definitely a little smoother and rounder even. Some people, however, had it very forward and inconsistent. Sometimes it would react great, and other times it would want to go 60 feet and almost back up. I had that happen to me a couple times, not sure why, but the vast majority of the time I got this, a nice, strong, round, continuous, predictable motion, and when these were discontinued, I had a lot of people reach out to see if I had one. Now, I wouldn't have let go of one if I had it, but I didn't anyway. I don't think anyone expected it to disappear as quickly as it did, but now that we have the blackout, it seems to have solved that curiosity, at least on paper. The also popular Atomic Core in the Infinite features a 248RG 053 differential and an 017 int diff. Slightly lower RG than the Dark, which will make it roll earlier, but a decent bit lower on differential and the int diff, so while it's earlier rolling, it's not going to be as aggressive throughout the lane, resulting in the still strong but more controllable look we're seeing, so the comparison on paper between these two seems to make sense. Out of the blackout, right off the rip, I think you can see it's the cleanest or longest down the lane and the sharpest overall. To be fair, I think the Dark code is sharper for me than it was for virtually anyone else, so if you were scratching your head watching that, part of it is that. Part of it is also a longer and heavier pattern in chromium than most people bowl on. That also makes my point about making sure you have the proper conditions for the ball you're trying to throw. For most people, throwing a Dark code on a regular league condition is like trying to hit a driver out of a sand trap, unless you're Casey Mattingly, but I digress. A ball that strong and that early needs oil to get it down the lane so it's not hooking and puking at your feet. Now, the blackout seems to take the idea of both the Dark and Infinite and turn them into something a bit more generally usable. The Dark and Infinite are just too strong for me to use in League, but the blackout being cleaner and a little weaker overall puts it into reasonable use territory on drier conditions than you would expect given what it looks like on paper. The Shapelock HD core has always been a little weird because it's even stronger than the Atomic and the PhysiX, but it isn't nearly as early as you'd expect and has always created a lot of shape down lane. 248RG 052 differential and an 020 int diff, so a bit stronger than the Atomic again, but what it lacks against the Rad 4 in differential, it makes up for in a lower RG, so how it's the longest and sharpest core of the three is interesting. think the Dark is overall the strongest of the three. The combination of super early and rolly, and of course having the same cover, plus a competitive amount of shape or friction response puts it on top. The Infinite for me is the earliest and smoothest, but if you said the Dark for you was earlier and smoother than the Infinite, I'd believe that too. Most of the Darks I've seen are earlier and smoother, and I think when I reviewed the Infinite, I actually had it longer and sharper than my first Dark code, so definitely believable there. However, either way, the Dark has always been stronger than the Infinite for me regardless, so that comment still stands. You can then see Dark and Infinite in the Blackout, but there's enough of a twist to satisfy a few different conditions. If you like the Dark and Infinite, I think it's obvious you're going to like the Blackout. However, if you didn't like them, I think the Blackout offers a different enough look in the correct direction that you'll be in good shape. It's not as early and slow as the Dark could be, and not nearly as forward as the Infinite could be, so I think for those that wanted to like the Dark and Infinite, here's your option that resembles both but improves on them in the right direction. I have a review up for the Blackout if you want a deeper look and a comparison to the Absolute. There are also more comparisons to come, and it will release with the Eternity Pi on September 22nd. Down in the description is a link to Bowler's Mart that will get one ordered for you, and of course don't forget my code ROSEDOLL10 to get 10% off your order at checkout at CoolWick. Thanks for watching, and may the strikes be with you.